Right now, in northwest Portland, along a 6-mile stretch of the Willamette River, there are 630 fuel storage tanks sitting side by side. Those tanks hold up to 350 million gallons of gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, and petrochemicals. More than 90% of every drop of liquid fuel used in the entire state of Oregon passes through this single corridor. Every gallon of jet fuel that goes into every plane at Portland International Airport comes from here. Every gas station in the Portland metro area is fed from here. One location, one corridor, 6 miles of tanks built on the worst possible ground you could choose for storing anything. The average tank in that corridor was built in 1954. That is 20 years before scientists even understood that the Cascadia subduction zone could produce a magnitude 9 earthquake. Those tanks were designed by engineers who had no idea what was sitting 60 miles offshore beneath the ocean floor. And what they are sitting on top of right now is loose, water-saturated sandy soil that geologists have confirmed will liquefy during prolonged strong shaking. The ground these tanks stand on will stop being solid and start behaving like a liquid in the first minutes of a Cascadia earthquake. And when that happens, up to 193 million gallons of fuel will spill into the Willamette River through the center of a major American city in a matter of minutes, not months, like the Deepwater Horizon. Minutes. Today, we are breaking down exactly what this facility is, what the soil beneath it does during an earthquake, what happens to the fuel when the tanks fail, where that fuel goes, what it ignites, what chemicals get released into the air alongside it, and why the people who live closest to this corridor may have no way to escape. The engineering, the confirmed studies, and the numbers that officials have already published, but almost nobody has seen. No guessing, just the data. Drop a comment right now. Do you live in Portland or anywhere in the Pacific Northwest? Tell me whether you knew about this before today. If you want real breakdowns of hidden infrastructure risks every single week, subscribe right now. A thumbs up pushes this to the people who need it most. Let us go for 5,000 likes. Now, let us get into it. The facility is officially called the Critical Energy Infrastructure Hub, or the CEI Hub. It runs along Highway 30 on the west bank of the Willamette River between Sauvie Island and the Fremont Bridge. 6 miles of fuel terminals, pipelines, storage tanks, and transfer infrastructure packed into a narrow industrial corridor directly adjacent to one of the 2 major rivers that flow through Portland. In 2020, Multnomah County and the City of Portland Bureau of Emergency Management commissioned a study to quantify exactly what would happen to this corridor during a Cascadia earthquake. The study was conducted by Econ Northwest, Silas Resilience, and Enduring Econometrics. What they found is one of the most alarming infrastructure risk assessments ever published for a major American city. The total potential fuel release from the CEI hub during a Cascadia earthquake ranges from 94.6 million to 193.7 million gallons. That upper figure is equivalent in total volume to the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill of 2010, the largest oil spill in United States history, except the Deepwater Horizon leak played out over 87 days in open ocean, 40 miles from the nearest coastline. This would happen in minutes, into a river, inside a city where more than 650,000 people live. To understand why the tanks fail, you need to understand what the ground does. Liquefaction is a process where saturated, loosely packed soil loses its structural integrity during prolonged shaking. The individual grains of sand or silt that normally press against each other and create a stable surface temporarily separate. The water between them takes over. The solid ground stops being solid and begins acting like a dense liquid. Anything heavy sitting on top of it sinks or tilts. Anything lighter than the liquefied soil, such as buried pipes or hollow underground tanks, floats upward. Foundations shift. Structures that were level a moment ago are suddenly listing sideways or pulling apart. The CEI hub sits on exactly this type of soil. Loose, sandy, water-saturated ground along a riverbank. And a full Cascadia rupture would shake that ground for 3 to 6 minutes, not the 15 or 20 seconds of a moderate California earthquake. 3 to 6 continuous minutes of violent motion. That duration is many times longer than what is needed to trigger liquefaction in soil like this. When liquefaction hits the CEI hub, the damage comes from 2 directions simultaneously. From below, the shifting ground warps foundations, ruptures buried pipelines, and destabilizes the bases the tanks sit on. From inside, the fuel itself becomes a weapon. Liquid inside a large, cylindrical tank does not stay still during shaking. It sloshes back and forth with enormous force, slamming against the tank walls in a rhythm that can crack welds, buckle shells, and rupture seams. The fuel is trying to tear the tank apart from the inside, while the ground is pulling it apart from the outside. According to the Multnomah County study, the monetized cost of the tank failures alone could reach $2.6 billion. But the report specifically noted that total costs and damages would likely be many multiples of that figure. Once the fuel is out of the tanks, it does not sit still. The CEI hub is directly on the bank of the Willamette River. Gravity and the liquefied, laterally spreading ground carry the fuel downhill into the water. The Willamette flows north through the center of Portland before joining the Columbia River, which means spilled fuel travels downstream through the most populated parts of the city. The study confirmed that oil releases from the tanks would spread downstream all the way to the mouth of the Columbia River, roughly 100 miles away. Every waterfront property, every park, every bridge piling, every neighborhood along both banks of that river is in the path. A sheet of petroleum moving on water in a city that has just experienced a magnitude 9 earthquake does not need someone to light it. The city is full of severed electrical lines, ruptured natural gas mains, and sparking equipment. One arc from one downed power line touching one slick of fuel on the river surface is all it takes. Burning fuel on moving water does not stay in one place. It rides the current. It spreads to both banks. It pulls against bridge pilings and debris. Firefighters who would normally contain a blaze like this cannot reach it because the road network is broken. The hydrant system has lost pressure because the water mains have failed. And the bridges connecting different parts of the city are expected to collapse in a Cascadia event. Adjacent to the CEI hub is Forest Park, more than 5,000 acres of continuous urban woodland covering Portland's West Hills. During a late summer earthquake, which is statistically the most likely season for a Cascadia rupture based on historical patterns, that forest would be dry and highly flammable. A fire reaching Forest Park from the river corridor below could threaten tens of thousands of residents in the surrounding neighborhoods, and the firefighting resources that would normally protect those neighborhoods would already be committed, trapped, or unavailable. But the fire is not the most dangerous thing the CEI hub releases. In 2023, Portland State University researchers published a study in partnership with Multnomah County Emergency Management and the Oregon State Fire Marshal's Office that, for the first time, examined the toxic chemical hazard. The study identified more than 1,100 facilities in Multnomah County that store hazardous chemicals. Researchers focused on 70 high-risk facilities, most located on the same seismically vulnerable soil as the fuel tanks. 23 of those facilities were deemed seismically vulnerable based on their construction date. The research team modeled the release of toxic gases from just 4 of the highest risk facilities, 4 out of 70. Under realistic wind and weather conditions, those 4 facilities alone could kill more than 2,500 residents and injure more than 17,000 through toxic inhalation. The chemicals involved include acids, explosive compounds, and substances with toxic inhalation hazard properties, gases that disperse invisibly into the air and cause fatal lung damage at concentrations below what the human nose can reliably detect. The communities most exposed to these plumes are in North Portland and along the river, neighborhoods that already experience some of the worst environmental conditions in the county. As Commissioner Carmen Rubio stated directly, if the CEI hub fails in a Cascadia earthquake, the consequences will be borne disproportionately by Portlanders of color. And these residents face a specific compounding problem. They cannot evacuate. The roads are buckled or blocked by debris. The bridges are down. The same infrastructure failure that prevents firefighters from reaching the fire prevents residents from escaping the toxic cloud. Emergency Management Director Chris Voss told the county board plainly that the impact would be so great, in part because first responders, communication, and transportation damaged by the quake would make evacuation delayed or even unlikely. The USGS estimates a 10 to 15% chance of a full margin magnitude 9 Cascadia earthquake in the next 50 years. Multnomah County's own assessment puts the probability of a major seismic event at 26% in the same timeframe. The Cascadia Fault last ruptured on January 26, 1700, 325 years ago. The average interval between major ruptures over the past 10,000 years is roughly 200 to 500 years. We are inside that window right now. The tanks can be rebuilt to modern seismic standards. They have not been. The soil can be reinforced or the facilities relocated. That work has barely started. The chemical inventories at the 70 high-risk facilities can be fully disclosed, assessed, and hardened. Much of that data remains incomplete. Oregon passed Senate Bill 1567, requiring fuel storage companies to submit seismic vulnerability assessments. That was a step. But the gap between what has been studied and what has been fixed remains enormous. The Cascadia Fault does not know about the 630 tanks on the riverbank. It does not know about the 350 million gallons of fuel or the 70 facilities storing chemicals that kill on contact with lung tissue. It only knows pressure, 2 tectonic plates locked together for 325 years, storing energy every single day. And the soil beneath those tanks is waiting to do exactly what physics demands the moment that energy is released. Subscribe if you want to keep following stories where the infrastructure risk is real and the data is public, but almost nobody is paying attention. Share this with someone in Portland. They deserve to know what is sitting 6 miles from their home on ground that turns to liquid. See you in the next one.